So, I teach people how to make meals easier all the time. And that's why in our Chart Your Course framework, which is secret number 2 in Accomplished Lifestyle, that's my coaching community, that section is called All the Meals, the section when we talk about meals. And it's called All the Meals because meals happen all day, every day, at least in my house. And there is always someone eating here. And so today I brought in an expert. I'm going to share with you a conversation I had with someone who is an expert, and we're going to be talking about how to make meals easier, specifically in freezer meal planning and prep. And so I'm going to be sharing this conversation that I had with Rachel Fairchild as part of my Simplify Your Summer online summit. Meals, like, they're a thing, right? And we need to unpack them. And I've got help for you. Rachel is so good at what she does. I can't wait for you to hear what she has to say. Let's jump in. Well, hey there. I am Jennifer Roskamp, a certified life coach and homeschool mom of 9 who is passionate about helping women just like you embrace the here and now while also being focused on creating the life you actually want. In reality, it's not about thinking life will get so much better or so much easier when you fill in the blank. Let's work on creating a life you love now. So let's dive in and get started on redefining Supermom to be someone who is present, intentional, and content rather than perfect in our homes, in our lives, and in our own skin. Let's get started. This is the Intentional Mom Podcast. Welcome, Rachel. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks so much for inviting me. I'm so excited. I'm always down to chat about meal planning and freezer meals and stuff like that.
Yeah, right. It can feel totally overwhelming. So I'm glad you're here to talk to us about that. So first, tell us a little bit about your kids and family and what life might look like in the summer for you. Is it a totally laid back time, totally crazy time? What's it like for you?
Well, I have 2 kids, and I have my husband around too, and we've got a couple dogs and more than a couple chickens, and we've got a whole like slew of things going on, especially in the summer. Lots of things going on outside for us, but really, as my kids have gotten older, the summers have gotten way more chaotic. I have noticed. They're finally getting to the age where they can do like summer camps and stuff. And so it's gotten interesting, but I'm really trying this summer. Here's my hope for this summer. My hope is I'm not going to work every day.
There you go.
And we're just going to have a little bit more fun and see how that goes. But, we kind of go with the flow. We're that type of family. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So when it comes to meals, like there are two what I consider kind of like buzzwords, right? There's meal planning and then there's meal prepping.
Yes.
Can you kind of tell us a little bit about each one of those? Like what are each one of those?
Absolutely. This is like this is a subject that I'm very passionate about because a lot of times when I start talking about freezer meal prep and stuff, people don't understand that there is a difference because there is. And there's a big difference. So the meal planning, and when I refer to meal planning, I'm really thinking about that weekly like meal planning cycle that people do. And that's when, you usually, for most people, I feel like at this point, it's like you're scrolling through Pinterest and you're trying to find recipes, and you kind of put things down for each night of the week, and then you try and execute it each night of the week. A lot of the times when we're talking about meal planning, we don't usually prep ahead too much.
Mm-hmm.
But with meal prep, we kind of add, it's an extra step, but at the same time, I find that when I meal prep, I don't have to plan nearly as much. There's a lot more flexibility there. So when you meal prep, you've got a tiny bit of planning involved, but most of it is just like cutting up what you need to cut up, throwing things together. Sometimes you cook it ahead, sometimes you don't. It really depends on the meal. And then once you have that portion done, then you have some meals ready to go that you can grab and cook or grab and heat up, whatever you want to do. And I find a lot it's like preference based on what people like to do. Some people can't imagine like prepping things ahead and like sticking to it, or I grab random things, but other people would. For me anyways, I'm like, I could not cook every night from scratch. There's just no way. There's no way.
Me neither, especially, it's like who wants to spend all summer in the kitchen? Like I would much rather spend a collective
longer amount of time in the kitchen so that I don't have to be in there, or at least not much at all, later
Yes.
in the week. Like I'd rather just get it done and get it over with and buy myself some time and relief for later. So then though, then there's the freezer meals, right? And that throws a whole nother term into the mix. And so it's often easy also to feel overwhelmed at just the thought, right? And I know it's probably because we overcomplicate it, right? People, like, we overcomplicate so many things, right? And so we probably wonder also, another thing is like, is it even going to taste good if we haul it out of the freezer? So can you maybe share a couple of reasons why maybe putting the freezer to work is helpful, especially in the summer? And then let us know too, like our meals are going to taste okay, right? Like, how do we know?
Right? Yes. That is a big question that I get all the time, because a lot of time when you say the word freezer meal prep, people are immediately thinking of like your grandma's mushy casseroles that she like grabbed out of the freezer, or like, your leftovers you
Freezer
just threw in
burn.
the freezer for later. And this is not that. When you do it the right way, and like the strategic way that we do to make sure that freezer meals actually taste good in the end, it's not that. So when you throw freezer prep into the mix with these two other things, what I've found anyways, is that I can capitalize on way less time spent in the kitchen between the prep and the dishes, especially
Oh, dishes. Yeah, right.
the dishes. And then two, there's way less planning because I just like grab things from my freezer. Honestly, I can have a month planned ahead, because that's usually what I do is I'll prep for the month of dinners. It takes me about 4 hours to get all that done.
4 hours for a
Four
month of
hours.
meals.
That's it. That's it.
That is
Now,
huge, because that is another
oh
big
yeah.
question, I would imagine, right? Like, what is the time investment?
Oh yeah. So yeah, when so we have like these step-by-step freezer guides. And so I like test these thoroughly to make sure that we get it within that 4 hours, because nobody has time. We don't, especially in the summer too. Like I want to be outside with my kids in the garden. I want to be doing a million other things, not in my kitchen. So yeah, so that's what we do. I usually do 2 2 hour. I've split it up into 2 2 hour like portions because I don't want to cook for 4 hours straight.
Right. No.
No,
Right.
I don't. So I'll do it after, usually it's after my kids go to bed, because I don't want my kids there either, unless they're bigger. Then it's easier. Then they can help and it's faster. But my kids are too little right now, and it'd take me 2 times as long to finish.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I love how you talk about, because I never really thought of, I mean, I knew it and I experience it, but I never really thought about really the advantage to the freezer meals is, yes, the meal, but it's also the cleanup. Like,
oh yeah.
and even if you break it down further, like, it's also shopping less too, right? Like,
Mhm.
because you're shopping in bulk as well,
Yes.
I imagine, right?
Yeah, like I usually, we save so much money too, just on our budget overall, because we buy it all up front. Usually in my area, like my freezer meal guides will cost around $200 for 20 meals that feed 4 to 6 people. Usually in other places, it's going to cost like, it's going to fluctuate by 50-ish bucks to $100, something like that. But once we do that, our grocery shopping through the week is not, I mean, I go grab fruit for snacks and I
Yeah.
grab some lunch meat. And that's about it. There's no big shopping trips. Like it just cuts down so much on time spent doing all of those other things. And it's very freeing, especially when I'm like, if it's a rainy day, yeah, I'll go prep in my kitchen. But if it's nice outside, I want to go. I don't want to
Yeah.
be here. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I hear you saying is, oh my gosh, it's going to save time. It's going to
Mhm.
save money. It's going to save stress. It's going to save,
Yeah.
like, sign me up for that. So then if we're thinking about the planning, the prepping, and then the freezer prepping throwing in there, how can we kind of like put them together in a simplified way? So
For
how can
sure.
we get some meals in the freezer so that they are ready when we need them? And I'm guessing this will take some time to kind of get through this question. Like, can you just give us a simplified, again, because we don't want to overcomplicate it,
Yes.
simplified, like, start here and then do like, how does that look?
Mhm. So what I usually do when I'm like getting ready for a prep, like I have my recipes or whatever, and this is what we do with our guides, but you don't even have to use our guides to be able to do this. Like you decide on a few recipes that are going to be freezer friendly. And to honestly, the easiest way in the summer, my favorite thing to do is literally just to prep the meat ahead of time, and that's it. Because there's so much you can just throw it on the grill. Like just throw it on the grill. You can be outside while you're doing it, or your husband can do it and then he's cooking.
Right.
I can get my husband to grill anytime. So it's always an advantage for me.
Totally.
But so basically decide on what you're gonna do. Make that grocery list. I order it. I do not go to the grocery store anymore. I do the pickup.
So much easier, huh?
Right. And then once you kind of figured that part out, and that's there's usually like meat's always like a go-to of like it's gonna freeze well every single time. And grab some pre-frozen veggies that are already chopped up for your veggies in there. That makes it so much easier. Once you get to that part, really from there, it's just like going step by step through your recipes and like knocking things out. Just and set a plan, write down what you think you're gonna like go through. And I feel like I'm oversimplifying it, but I could talk for literally 2 hours on on this particular subject. But once you've gotten those recipes that you know that work, and kind of a general like step-by-step process that works, you can knock this out so fast. And I usually recommend, if people want to start small, to start with like recipes that you know your family already loves, and something that's simple. Just have it in the freezer, and you don't think like, but that only takes me 15 minutes maybe to throw together. But no, you're going to the grocery store, you're cleaning up the dishes, you're doing all these other things, and you're using your mental like load of trying to decide what's for dinner even. It is so nice to just be able to grab it out of the freezer and be like, okay, well, this is what we're going to have. Yeah. And you can either throw it in with Instant Pots. You can throw them in frozen most of the time. Or sometimes you can thaw them ahead of time if you want to use it in another way or another cooking method. Like there's so much flexibility here that it really does make it easy just to like knock out just about anything you want to do and freeze it flat. That would be like after you get through your step by step and everything you want to do, freeze it in your little bag, freeze it flat.
That's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up. Are you using just like literally freezer bags, or like because that's a question that I really didn't come to mind until just now. Like what supplies are needed? Like
so really
normally have.
Yeah. So I highly recommend, the only thing that I will say that you absolutely for sure should buy for freezer meal prep is baggie holders. And I wish I had one here. I'm at my office that we just got, and we haven't like moved our stuff.
These things, right?
Yes. They're the little green, they're usually green things that stand up like this and they hold your bags. They're lifesavers. They cost like nothing. They're like maybe a little over $1 a piece, and they are amazing. I've tried to prep without them. It never works out well. But yeah. So if you have those, and then some freezer bags, that's all you need. You really don't need, it's everything you already have in your kitchen. Otherwise there's nothing like special really. Yeah. But I always recommend that people, freeze their bags flat, because then they thaw quicker. They're easier to store. Once they are frozen flat, you can move them in any different way for storage purposes. And a lot of people too will ask like, okay, but do I need a deep freezer? Because I get that question a lot. And I'm like, no, like I did this for years and just the freezer attached to my fridge, and I could fit like a month of food plus the chicken nuggets and the ice cream. And that's all I needed.
It's important.
It is. It really is.
Yeah. And another thing that just came to mind too, which I hope this is okay, just to kind of rapid fire questions at you. Are there certain things like tried and true, like you mentioned meats, are there certain things that tried and true like freeze well that maybe like would point us in the direction? And then the other side of that is, are there certain things that you can say these tend to not freeze well?
Yes, absolutely. So really, honestly, anytime you want to freeze like just meat with like a sauce or something like that. Like one of my favorite things to prep ahead is like a bourbon chicken recipe. It's so good and it's so easy to cook down the road, and it freezes perfect every time. Like now we don't, just in case anybody hasn't like really looked into freezer meal prep before, for my freezer meals, 80% of the time we're not cooking anything ahead. It's just like
question. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So we're just prepping it raw. So we're cutting up the raw chicken and then throwing it up in with the sauce or whatever that we want to cook it with. And then we cook it later. And that's actually part of that like strategy that makes it actually taste good in the end. Cause it's not just like leftovers that you're reheating. It's a meal that you're just cooking right then and tastes just the same as if you would have done it on its own later.
Yeah. That's true then, because if
Mhm.
if you're not doing any cooking, I guess I never thought about that before either. If you're not doing
Yes.
any cooking ahead of time, it is really exactly the same then as
Yeah.
just cooking it fresh, like doing it all fresh in that
Yeah.
moment.
And because there's really no reason to cook it ahead. You're going to spend just as much time reheating it if you cook it ahead as you are just like cooking it after it's frozen. And
Yeah.
it tastes so much better. So there and so you're saving so much time just prepping. That's why when I say prep freezer prepping, it's literally prepping and no cooking. Now, some things I personally like to cook ahead, and that's like a ground beef. I will usually cook my ground beef ahead of time because I don't like the grease mixed in with everything. I'm not a fan.
Right.
But other than that, like there's very few things that you have to cook ahead.
Yeah.
Um,
Can you put like, are there certain things? Okay, so here's a question too. Then again, I hope it's okay that I'm rapid fire asking.
I'll go for it.
Can you go? I understand tools like the Instant Pot. A lot of times, like you
Mhm.
mentioned this already, I feel like a lot of times with the Instant Pot, you can take stuff from freezer, go directly to the Instant Pot. But if you aren't using a tool like the Instant Pot, let's just say the grill, for instance, can you go straight from the freezer to the grill or?
You could do the freezer to the grill. It does change cook times and stuff like that, you know. So obviously you're gonna have to cook it longer. But I've done it before and not had issues. Sometimes you have to really make sure with on the grill with your meat thermometer that you're checking things and making sure the outside isn't getting too overdone. And then the insides raw. You know, there's just like that fun mix. I usually try and recommend that people pull out their freezer meal basically when you're cooking dinner the night before, pull out what you want for the next night, put it in the fridge. It should be thawed by the next day. And that way, usually it cooks quicker that time and you have way more options for how you cook it then to just go with whatever your crazy schedule looks like.
Right, right. Are there certain things that don't freeze well, like where you would say,
For
yeah,
sure.
don't try this?
Yeah, like basically a lot of like creamy type based things. If you don't now, if I have a pasta that I make that's amazing that I make ahead of time and freeze, and it's great and it's a creamy pasta, but it's a little bit of creamy sauce mixed in with a ton of pasta. So it freezes fine. But if you had a jar of that sauce, I usually don't recommend that because it separates funny. So things like sour cream and like a whole thing of sour cream and mayonnaise and like stuff like that, I don't recommend. And like fried foods, they don't freeze well. Um, and things like fully cooked pasta and fully cooked rice, I usually don't recommend either. If you're gonna do those two things, you undercook them by a couple minutes and then they're fine on the end. So they
Oh, okay.
don't taste like because you know you had that mushy freezer pot. I mean, I've had mushy freezer pasta. It's not good. Like
Right.
it tastes bad. So all you really have to do is undercook it by about 2 minutes and it'll taste like right in the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, are there some things like that you could share with us from having done this a while? Like, hey, these are some things that I learned the hard way. You know, how there's always those things that when we do them, we learn like what not to do sometimes. So, I would love to know, do you have any like what not to do tips?
Oh, for sure. So, never overfill your bags. The freezer bags, usually you only want them about 2/3 of the way full. And once you get there, stop. Just open another bag if you need more for that meal because
That's
they will
a good tip.
bust in your freezer and then you're going to have stuff. If you can't tell, I've done it many times. I'm like, oh, this will be fine. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
And that's the same with like liquid. It's kind of in the same vein of like, I usually try and make it a rule that if unless it's like a bag with just like liquid and meat, usually that's not going to be too bad. But if I'm putting liquid in something, I'm going to try and put less than a cup of liquid because liquid expands in the freezer and it will bust your bags. A lot of it revolves around that, and like freezer burn. I get that question a lot about like, okay, but how does all your food not end up freezer burn? And I honestly have very rarely, if ever, get freezer burn, but it's because it's something has sat for a very long time and I should have thrown it out probably 2 years ago or so, like something like that. But anytime you're freezer prepping, especially like this, you need to put your meals in the fridge first. And then after they're really cold from the fridge, like I usually leave them overnight, then put them in the freezer. Because when we put a bunch of like kind of cold, but not super cold meals into our freezer all at once, it's going to change the temperature of your whole freezer. The meals aren't going to freeze right. And then that just leads eventually to freezer burn. And so I think a lot of people just throw things in their freezer and it will freezer burn like that. That's just how it works.
That I was going to say that same thing. I was going to say, I feel like having done it wrong, I didn't really know. I mean, I sensed that it was getting like freezer burn would sometimes be like, it would get to the freezer burn state much faster if it wasn't cool enough when I put it in there. And so that actually is a thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I can't tell you how many people are like, wait, what? And then they try that and they're like, they don't have any issues anymore. People think that their freezers don't work. And I'm like, no, you just got to get it real cold because your freezer is just working real hard to keep everything real cold. And when you put a bunch of food like that in there, that's not cold and trying to get it, and it's quickly trying to get that temperature down again, it doesn't quite work out.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned liquid. Let me ask you this question.
Yes.
Do you still freeze soups, like something that is a liquid? Are you still doing that in bags, or in that situation, do you use other things?
So when if I do it in two different methods. So if I'm freezing, like if I'm going to make a soup later and I haven't actually made it yet, I'm just prepping it, I won't put any broth in there at all. I'll just put the filling, basically anything else that's going to go in the bag. And then I'll dump the bag and pour the broth in because broth's easy, right?
Right.
Especially I get the better than bouillon, like glass jars. They're amazing. And so it makes it so easy. Now, if I'm freezing an already made soup, I actually purchase these things called super cubes. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're literally amazing. They're like individually portioned silicone freezer things. And so it's almost like an ice cube tray, but for bowls of soup. And then they pop out individually. So you can freeze them into these little cubes. And you pop them out individually into, and you can throw them into a bag after they're frozen, or just leave them in there. And basically you can thaw out like portions of soup at a time. It's genius. I love them.
Gosh, I was just going to say that is like life-changing for me because I love soup. And so I am, that's why I asked that question, because I am often freezing soup and I did not know that such a thing existed, but that is so perfect because for me, I never know how many people are going to be eating it at the same time. Sometimes it's just me, but sometimes it's other people. And so I'm always freezing soup like in these huge quantities.
Oh yeah.
So then I have to sometimes I don't mind eating the same soup like for a whole week. Like sometimes that's okay. But
other times it's rather,
I would much rather prefer that method. Like that is awesome. I'm excited to check that out. So,
they're amazing. I love them. I've used them for years. Like they were on Shark Tank at one point. And I had been using them way before that. And I was like, I knew they're wonderful. They're just wonderful.
I'm excited. That's cool. Well, when we think about like prepping, no, let's see. It kind of typically would go planning, prepping, freezer prepping. Like, is that which one of these, if there's just women or moms who are listening and they're just like totally overwhelmed with trying to do meals in the summer, which one of those three skills, and I don't know if there is a way, but if I were to really press you and say, which one of these three skills, if she was only going to do one of those, like just start super small, which one of those do you feel like is maybe the easiest one to start with?
I think it depends on what it kind of depends on what your like lifestyle is, right? Like if you have the time to prep ahead to jump into something, I would do freezer meal prep in a heartbeat. But sometimes it does depend on if you have those solid like hour to 2 hour blocks of time to be able to execute the prep and stuff. Because if you don't have that, then I would honestly flip to weekly meal planning, but doing it super simple and
Yeah.
just go ahead. Even if you did the tiniest bit of prep with it and planned out, okay, well, you know, everybody's seen those like the bin strategy. Have you seen that where you put everything for the one meal in the bin?
Yes.
It's genius. And like if you do something simple like that, it takes literally minutes. And
Yeah.
that can get you through too. I mean, I'm always going to be partial to freezer meal prep because I think it just saves me so much time, like in so many different places. But if it's not realistic for you to be able to dedicate that much time to it, then flip it and just do what little you can. I mean,
Yeah.
anything helps, right? I'm on the board of like anything you
Right.
can do will help.
Right. And you probably get this question a lot too. Like if we're thinking about a typical refrigerator, typical freezer,
Mhm.
when we think about when you say you can do a whole month, like do we need will that a whole month of freezer meals fit in a typical freezer? Like how much space does that take up?
Yeah, so when these bags are frozen, they're literally like flat. I mean, they don't take up much space at all, and then they stack up on top of each other. So for me, I've had three different freezers on my like three different fridges in the past like 3 years. So but um, but I have always been able to fit a month of freezer meals in each of those freezers, and they were different. One was like the kind you pull out from underneath, and those fit great. The other kind is like the French door type freeze, like where the freezer's all on one side, and those have been fine too. I've been able to always fit a month of freezer dinners basically, plus a little bit of other things, because you always need a couple other things in your freezers other than the prep meals. If you don't have room for it, I always like encourage people to try and like give it a week or two before you freezer meal prep and actually go through and just like plan your meals out to use up everything in your freezer. I included in all of our guides of like, it's called a freezer clean out challenge, so that you can get all the random stuff out of your freezer and then do the prepped meals in there instead, because that's going to be way more helpful for you in the end.
Yeah, than just a bunch of random, who knows even what. I can't even use any of it because I
Can't
don't
even
have
see
enough
it.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have this, but there's not enough of it to do anything with. So but I feel bad, being intentional with that stuff that's in there for sure.
Mhm.
So for the woman who's listening who says, you know what, I'm new to all of this, but I've been intrigued for a while. And now I'm feeling a little bit encouraged because I certainly want to save time. I want to save money, that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
I'm asking everybody, is there a tip or two of just like this quick get started now action tip that you could share where someone could easily just like maybe dip a little bit more than a toe in the water, maybe like put a foot in the water, maybe
Yeah.
put a foot in the water. Where would she start?
Well, like I would start. I know we'll talk. I have that free freezer meal cheat sheet I
Yeah,
have.
you
I
got
always
an amazing tool for us. So yeah, tell us
yeah.
about that.
That one I always recommend to start with, because basically my free freezer meal cheat sheet is just all my best tips and tricks and all like different like safety guidelines and things not to freeze and all that kind of stuff is all packed into that PDF. So that you have all the knowledge you need to start. But then if you really wanted to like just try it out as quickly as humanly possible, I usually just pick a very, very simple like meat-based dinner, prep that into 2 bags. That's all. Just do like 2 dinners and just see how it goes for you. I have like recipes and mini preps and stuff that we do too. Like we do like 1 hour preps a lot. I have like all kinds of those for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That you can try out, and those are good to like kind of slowly step in as well, because they're easy and they're simple, and we don't have to make a big 4 hour commitment. Even though for me, I like jumping right in because I'm like, okay, I'm going to get it done, and then I'm not going to do anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely, like you said, we don't want to overfill the bags, but is there
Yes.
anything else that we can do that would make us like sometimes when things feel new and kind of unknown, it's like how am I going to mess this up? Like, how do we not mess it up other than overfilling the bags? Is there anything else that like, for instance, here's a question.
Yeah.
so maybe this will be one of your things. Like, do we have to make sure all the air's out of the bag? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So a lot of people will ask me the question of, oh, why don't you like vacuum seal these? Because wouldn't it last longer? And honestly, no. Like I have a vacuum sealer and I have regular bags. I think the regular bags work fine. But yeah, the general rule is you're gonna make sure it's not too full. And you're gonna try and get as much air out of it as humanly possible. Usually I just like kind of roll the bag on itself and force the air out like slowly. So I'm not like forcing anything out.
Right.
But once you do that and you for sure put it in the fridge, let it flatten the fridge, flatten the freezer, like it's pretty simple in that instance. It gets real easy right there if you follow those few rules.
Yeah.
And then you just usually I will recommend thawing it beforehand because sometimes if you do have a meal that's like half frozen, half thawed, it cooks real funky.
Oh,
Yeah, so I suggest you're either one or the other. You're either throwing it in frozen or you're throwing it in thawed. Um, and a lot of meals you don't even have to thaw. Like a lot you can do from frozen. But it just kind of depends on the meal.
yeah.
But yeah, it's really and then you dump it.
Yeah.
And then yeah, and that's it's really it's a beautiful thing once
Yeah.
you get like through those a few steps there.
Yeah. Do you have one meal that is pretty simple, that's like a family favorite in your family where you could say, this is one that we love, it's easy, it's uses mostly normal ingredients. Like, do you have like a favorite go-to that you could suggest someone could start with, and then where could they
Yeah.
find it?
Oh, for sure. So, it's probably right now, my kids will eat chicken and rice any day of the week, any day. And so I've got a bourbon chicken and rice recipe that I talked about earlier. That one is like a hit all of the time in my house. I'll always have it in the freezer because it's
Yeah.
so easy and it makes my 4-year-old who is very picky happy. So that one is actually, if you go to thiscraftyhome.com, it's one of our more recent blog posts.
Oh, awesome.
It'll be, we just shared that recipe maybe a few weeks ago or something like that.
Awesome.
And it's super
Awesome.
easy.
Well,
Yeah.
that'll be one to check out then.
That was a lot, right? Isn't Rachel so amazing? So I hope you found my conversation with Rachel to be helpful. I know I found little light bulb moments all throughout our conversation that are useful any time of the year. So, in the next episode, you're going to learn how to put an end to manic mornings. Whether your mornings are a hot mess because you've got kids or just because you struggle with mornings all on your own, starting your day off in a manic mess doesn't bode well for the rest of the day. Mornings are so important. And so, this will be an episode you won't want to miss.